Welcome back to Conversations with Boston School Psychologists, building safe and supportive schools one conversation at a time, where we spotlight the people, practices, and partnerships behind behavioral health in Boston public schools. I'm here with our Senior Director of Behavioral Health Services, Dr. Andria Amador, and today we're thrilled to welcome Dr. Byron McClure. Dr. McClure is a nationally certified school psychologist, founder and CEO of School Psych AI, founder of Lessons for SEL, electrifying speaker, and best-selling co-author of Hacking Deficit Thinking. With over a decade of experience as a practitioner in Maryland and Washington, D.C., he has led the charge in shifting mindsets from what's wrong to what's strong. His mission has always been to improve outcomes for youth, especially those from historically marginalized communities. Byron, thank you so much for joining us today.
Always a pleasure to connect with you, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's get into the first question. As the founder of School Psych AI, can you tell us a little bit more about this initiative, including common challenges that school psychologists face when using AI and how School Psych AI can help with these challenges?
Absolutely. It's important to start with, I've been a national certified school psychologist since 2010. I've worked elementary, middle, high school, rural, urban, suburban, alternative schools, and everywhere in between. And I have been really at the front of behavior problems. How can we support students? I've been able to do some school transformation work, and then report writing. And as I've practiced, I've always recognized that there is more than just report writing. And I wanted to share that background because I understand the barriers that we face in this work of just doing the job, right? Like that's hard enough. And so I've always purposed to find a need and solve that need, whether that's through social emotional learning, whether that's through social skills groups, whether that's through restorative practices, or school transformation work. I've always found a need and tried to solve that need. And School Psych AI was really birthed out of that ethos of looking, how might we be able to solve the problem, to me, of our practice, which is not enough time, too many barriers, and a very limited scope of practice. And those barriers really present itself with us trying to actually implement artificial intelligence. Look, it's a new technology. It's changing so quickly, and our practice takes time to catch up in general, and it's taking time to catch up to this new technology that moves so fast. And so some of the challenges that I've personally seen since we've launched School Psych AI, depending on when you're listening to this, about 2.5 years ago, are really centered around things such as data, privacy, security, trust. And at a more fundamental level, how do we even get started with this technology? How do we talk to a robot? And so those are things that myself, my team, even in partnership with the amazing team in Boston, is how can we give people the tools, the strategies, and help them explore this technology that matches real world practice?
Absolutely. And Andrea, you've really embraced School Psych AI. You have definitely been on the forefront and making sure your school psychologists are well trained by the man, the myth, the legend, Byron himself. And so, Andrea, do you want to get into that initiative a little bit?
Well, I was going to say, if we do something, we want to do it right. So when we knew we wanted to embrace AI and understand it, there was one person to go to, and we were so honored that Byron was willing to work with us, with the entire district, and start from the very beginning with us so that we can learn together and establish best practices for how school psych departments can use this technology. And that's our goal. I want to say that we have a shared experience in wanting to address barriers that are created when there aren't enough school psychologists and they do not have an expanded role. And there are several ways to do that. Internship programs, changing your job description, adopting the practice model. But AI is another tool in our toolbox to be able to expand the reach and capacity of school psychologists. But we also wanted to, as we were doing that, understand what's the best way to do that. How do you train an entire department? How do you adapt policies, practices in alignment, and have it be integrated with the other services being offered? And so one of the really amazing things that Byron's helping us do is say, okay, what are you doing in your district, for example, for interventions? How do we make School Psych AI have the embedded tools and resources for that? So for example, if you're using Strong Kids, let's put some of our Strong Kids prompts in there. We use the BIMAS too. Let's make sure that people can use School Psych AI and the data from BIMAS 2 seamlessly. And so we're really customizing it. And that's the beauty of not only our partnership with Byron, but the technology that he's established can help other people do as well.
That's incredible, Byron. Do you want to add anything more about that initiative real quick?
You could tell when we think about this initiative that we have, as I'm listening to Andria talk, just how in sync I think our fundamental beliefs towards practice are. When I talked about the elementary and middle school, I practiced at those levels. The very first curriculum that I utilized was Strong Kids. And I researched the work of Dr. Kim Murrow out at the University of Oregon. And that was a foundational book, a curriculum that I use with my students, and then went on to adapt it a bit and make it culturally responsive for the students who I work with and serve. And even Andrea, I saw you posted just the other day about Dr. Elias. I mean, there's just so much synergy in how we approach this work and the principles in which we approach it. It's just a match made in heaven, and understanding the real practical applications that our students and school communities go through. I think this partnership that we have, because we are so in sync, is just a model of what's possible while not ignoring the real challenges, but moving towards solutions in a collaborative manner.
Absolutely. And I wanted to get your opinion, because we have a national audience of school psychologists. What are the best tips and recommendations when using AI as a school psychologist?
Yes. The first thing that you want to do, that I encourage people, is to understand what this technology is. So before you jump into a ChatGPT or Gemini or even a School Psych AI, is to understand what this technology is, understand what it's not. And so this is AI literacy. And I think before you jump into any initiative, let alone artificial intelligence, you have to deepen your understanding of that intervention, that tool, that strategy, that approach, so that you can understand some of the intricacies of what it is, recognize that there are very real limitations, understand the ethical considerations of this technology, and then deepen your ability to even know things like, how do I communicate with this large language model? What is a large language model? LLM, right? This goes to the AI literacy. And then when you can start to build your literacy around artificial intelligence, start small. Well, Byron, how do I start small? Glad you asked. You start small, to me, identifying tasks that you do every single day. Emails, paraphrasing, rewriting things, strengthening language that you might utilize, coming up with interventions, creating SEL interventions for your students, whatever your task that you're doing every single day. Identify those tasks. And then once you have that list, say, what's a small task that I wish I can outsource? Perhaps it's emails. Okay, how might I leverage artificial intelligence to help me craft emails? What if it's taking the technical jargon that we have in our reports and evaluations and rephrasing that to make it more strength-based? how might I leverage an artificial intelligence platform such as School Psych AI to help me remove this clinical jargon? And this is where my AI golden rules can take you to that next level. And on the School Psych AI website, I've shared this with the Boston team, my AI golden rules. And there's 6 golden rules that I have. And one of those golden rules is to talk to Sophia, which is our conversational chatbot, or any conversational chatbot that you're using, as a thought partner. And as you're having a conversation with your thought partner, you might say, "Hey, Tim, I'm working with a student recently identified with an emotional disability. What are some evidence-based interventions that I might try?" And then Tim, as my thought partner, might say, "Byron, have you tried a Strong Kids, or have you tried Check In, Check Out?" Then I might say, "I'm in a strapped school. We don't have access to Strong Kids, but I might want to try Check In, Check Out." Tim and I, we're thought partners. We're having a conversation. And I think that's one of my favorite golden rules of how we should talk to these models. But start small, be strategic on those tasks that you have, see what you can outsource to these models, and then treat these models like a thought partner.
Well, that's such a great answer. I really appreciate just how dynamic it is. It isn't just about efficiency. It's also about learning the limitations, knowing the ethical considerations, and then starting small, building your way up from all of those mundane tasks, and then being more effective as a school psychologist, giving more parent-friendly information by removing the jargon. There is a way to use AI that makes you such a better school psychologist, and I absolutely love that. And Andria, do you want to just touch real quick on how school psychologists in Boston Public Schools are using it in the way that Byron explained?
Yeah. When the first school psych came to me to talk about AI, I said, slow down. I have no idea what this is, and I'm not going to do something that I don't know what I'm doing. And so she'll still tease me about that. Ronnie, one of our school psychs. We have driven change in our department by school psychs leading change. So it's an example of Ronnie coming to say, there's something out there that's going to make our world better. We need to do it. So we found an expert, Byron, to come help us. And one of the things we did is start an AI committee that's led by school psychologists. And they help us drive change. They help the central department understand what specific elements people want to learn. They come back to Byron and say, this is what we need. This is an aspect of the program we want to see, or this is a tool we want to need. And so what we've done is everyone has a monthly training with Byron on School Psych AI. He's developed a course sequence for us to learn the basic skills. And now that we are more than half a year in, what we're finding is there's a bit, like all learning, right? There's a bell curve. We have the early adopters, the people who are interested but still learning, and then some people who are having a harder time seeing where this can help them. So we're trying to meet each learner where they are by giving them trainings, having them have a chance in smaller groups to practice it, and then bring back their learning and share that with others. So it's really exciting when you see someone who finally has used it for something for the first time, come back and then be a cheerleader and say, hey, look, like I did a social skills lesson and progress monitoring for my group, and it took me 30 seconds, and let me show you how to do it. So a lot of that peer-to-peer training gets people really excited. So we've done a variety of like direct instruction with Byron, using the resources that he has, incredible resources on School Psych AI that people have accessed, giving him our resources to embed, and then practice. So this is not a, 3 training session and then we're done. We have a 2-year contract. Everyone, all the school psychs and our interns have access to School Psych AI. This is a journey that we're on. We're also lucky to be in a district that is establishing AI trainings, AI practices, and has given all school staff access to Gemini. And so the school psychs are getting both platforms and getting the training they need to use it well.
That's amazing. I really think that Boston Public Schools is a pioneer when it comes to AI. I don't think there are too many other districts, if any, doing that much where we're having monthly trainings with Byron. We're having access to School Psych AI, to Gemini, and all of these different considerations and discussions that result from this is just fantastic. And so kudos to Boston Public Schools. And we're going to shift gears now from AI to strengths-based approaches. Because Byron, you're not just a master of one, you are a master of many things, including the Hacking Deficit book where it talks about strengths-based approaches. And so do you want to get into that now? What is the approach that school psychologists should be using, and maybe give some practical tips for school psychologists when using a strengths-based approach in their practice?
Yeah, to me, for practitioners to utilize a strength-based approach in their work, they first have to understand what deficit thinking is. And I believe that deficit thinking is one of the most pervasive problems in education. It's a distorted lens of seeing inherently what's wrong and placing that blame within students. It's a ideation of we need to fix students and that they are inherently the problem. The problem lives within them instead of examining structural inequities, instead of examining systemic barriers, instead of examining, hey, there's assets that are already there, which to me lays the foundation for understanding strength-based thinking. Now, Tim, Andria, we also have to understand what strength-based thinking is. And to really understand what it is, you have to understand what strength-based thinking is not. Okay? To me, strength-based thinking begins from a place of what's strong here. What assets already exist within the individual, within their communities, where they're from, their culture, and everywhere in between. It's not ignoring those assets, it's bringing them front and center. It's also not ignoring deficits and challenges. It's just changing the order of how you start, okay? What you also have to understand about strength-based thinking, it's not this pie in the sky, toxic positivity, everything is going to be all right. It's not that. To me, it's a lot more radical than that. It's a belief that, hey, we've always had these assets. We've always been chosen people, whatever your cultural dynamics or wherever you are. It's going into who you are. It's owning your identity 110%. And then leveraging those assets, your identities, your beliefs, your dispositions, your social capital, your resources, to then counteract those things that you might have real challenges with. It's balance. It's holistic. It's understanding that, yes, there might be challenges going on, but we can offset those things from a place of assets. And as practitioners, where we come in is helping people to identify and uncover the full picture of young people that we work with. And I believe that when we can shift from what's wrong to what's strong, then we can do some real work inside of education.
Absolutely. Great answer, Byron. And I can't help but notice that there are a stack of hacking deficit thinking books on Andria's desk over there, which is just awesome. It sounds like you're really leading the charge, Andria, in making sure that the school psychologists in Boston Public Schools are following this approach. So do you want to expand on that for a little bit?
Yeah, the funny thing is that wasn't even planned. They're there because Byron was a keynote speaker at a recent conference and more people wanted the book. So we bought more books and I haven't given them out yet. Yeah, our district and our department has focused for several years, many years, more than 15 years on anti-racist, anti-bias learning so that our district could be more culturally responsive to the children and families that we serve. And hacking deficit thinking for us was just another learning point on that never-ending learning journey of how to be more culturally responsive. One of the things that we've thought a lot about is practices like calling in, calling out, understanding your own history, what is bias and how do you address it. But we still realize that at the end of the day, we all come with a perception about bias, about behaviors, language, people, and how do we constantly kind of confront that and address that? And it can clearly come out in our work with children and families, particularly around psychological evaluations. The whole construct of special ed is identifying what's wrong with kids so they can be eligible for service. And so how do you strike that balance that Byron's saying of identifying actual weaknesses that need to be addressed, but not defining the child by those weaknesses, defining the child by his or her strengths? And so hacking deficit thinking really was a great way for us to continue again our arc of learning and to focus on specific activities. We like to use the word that like equity is action. It's not discussion. So if equity is action, it's changing how we talk about kids, the language we use when we talk about families, how we write psych reports. And it's a continuing journey for us. And what we found is the more you do this work, the more there's subtlety that you need help in figuring out. And so we're so lucky that Byron is also doing a multi-series training since last year with our team on how to actually put hacking deficit thinking to work, not just the theory. How is your work better because of this? And we're so happy to have him help us with that.
Absolutely. Byron, I wanted to know if you wanted to elaborate more on what Andria was saying and if you have more thoughts based on what Andria is doing in the Boston Public Schools.
One of the words that Andria used was action. And if you believe that deficit thinking is one of the most pervasive problems in education, as I stated, why is it so pervasive? I believe it's pervasive because of inaction. And if we're serious about shifting from what's wrong to what's strong, if we're serious about disrupting deficit thinking, if we're serious about improving outcomes for all students, then we have to move from inaction to action. We can't just make simple shifts in our language. We can't just make simple shifts in, one day out of the week. It has to be habitual. It has to be individual. It has to be at the systems level. And we have to fundamentally change how we practice from a state of inaction to being change agents, which the National Association of School Psychologists calls us to be. They dictate that we should practice as change agents in this work. And I believe that a basic belief of that to be a change agent is moving towards action. Now, look, you might be saying, Byron, that sounds great, but I'm just a practitioner. I'm just a psychologist. That's beyond my locus of control. How can I move from a space of inaction to action when everything is out of my control? Well, I'm glad that you asked. What do you have control over? What can you go into your school building today and do? For me, that was making a conscious decision that I am not going to view the young people inside of my school as the problem. I'm going to shift and look at data. Hey, principal, I'm not going to say my principal's name, but is it okay if I'm year one, if I look at some of our office discipline referral data just to see if I can analyze any trends and help out with some of the high discipline referrals that we're receiving? Sure, young, eager, first year practitioner, have at it. We don't have time to do it. And now I'm acting within my sphere of control. What else? The tools that I use to assess the students that I work with. I might not be able to buy the next latest, greatest assessment. I might only be relegated to utilizing the handful of tools that we have. But the Values in Action Survey, the VIA, is free. I can administer this strength-based assessment to identify strengths in the young people that I work with. Here's one better where you can take action. You can get up out your office. You can walk around. One of my favorite things that I would do, I would get a clipboard. I would go to my printer. Didn't work all the time. I would put some paper inside that clipboard, get a pen, and just walk around the building. Yes, I'm doing testing and evaluations and meeting after meeting and all of these things, but I am going to make it a point to take action by something as small as looking like I'm busy and walking around. And guess what happens, Tim? Hey, you look like you're doing something important. Can you come help me out with this? Hey, I'm working with this student who has XYZ going on. What are your thoughts about this? Taking action. That's paramount. And so back to the original question, and again, why this partnership is so powerful, because to move from what's wrong to what's strong, we both believe it's about action and equipping our practitioners with the tools, resources, and knowledge to take effective action.
Absolutely. Thank you, Byron. And Andria, Byron mentioned a lot of great practical things that school psychologists can be doing in the schools to take action. Do you want to elaborate more on that as to what the Boston School Psychologists are doing as far as taking action?
Yeah, I think all of us are obligated to continue to grow and learn. It's part of our professional responsibility. In our district, school psychologists receive over 100 hours of PD each year designed for them. So they have the opportunity to do intensive PD during the workday as well as after the workday. Each year, we establish goals to say what is something new we're going to learn, and then how we're going to prove that we do it, right? So how are we going to show that we've changed practice? And people get to do that in ways unique to their school. So as Byron said, like in one school, they may be leading their student support team. And so there's so many ways using hacking deficit thinking that our child study teams can get better. Just the way we talk about kids and families that our teams can get better. Identifying strengths on the teams and using those strengths to leverage interventions. There's so many specific ways that we can take both School Psych AI and hacking deficit thinking and put them together to do better for kids. So for an example, one school psych recently said that she took her report, de-identified it, of course, and then said, find areas of deficit thinking in this report and flag them for me. And then she went back and reflected, like, how could I change the language so this isn't deficit or blaming the student? And that was a great learning experience for her and an example of how these two worlds can merge to kind of make things better. So as Byron was giving tips to people, we hear that a lot when we present on our model, like, I'm just a school psych, what can I do? I think we can all do something. We can pick a skill that we want to learn each year and learn it. We can do one new activity every year, whether it's changing how you contact parents, whether it's sending out a resource every month to your teachers. It can be even as simple as being intentional in conversations with teachers when they need help reframing their language and you just being a role model. So there's something we can all do to change practice in both of these spaces. And we're lucky enough to have a strategic plan to do it. The other thing I just want to mention before we wrap up is that one thing that Byron and I were really serious about at the beginning of this partnership is establishing best practices. We like to look at the research before we implement a new activity, but there's not a lot of research on how do you train a school psych department to adopt AI. So because there's not research, we said, let's go into this with a real research mindset and let's collect data on how people are learning, how we're training them, and try to start to establish some best practices for it. So we do have a research committee as part of our department. We are collecting data, and come visit us at NASP and hear about our journey. We're excited to share it and want to learn from others as well.
Absolutely. Kudos to that research committee. Fantastic group of people. And Byron, you notice Andria mentioned a lot about using strengths-based language in psych reports. That's a big way that school psychologists communicate, along with, of course, email, things like communicating in person. But when it comes to school psychology reports, some school psychologists may hear strengths-based thinking and say, well, of course, I have to use deficits all over my report. And so why shouldn't I be doing that? Or should I be doing that, but also integrating strengths? I think there may be some confusion there. And I know you had mentioned earlier in this episode, it's not all pie in the sky. Of course, you're going to mention their weaknesses, but can you just elaborate and clarify to the school psychologists who are unfamiliar? So what should I be writing in my reports in order to acknowledge their deficits, but also make it strengths-based?
The truth. Come closer, y'all. I need everyone to hear me loud and clear when I say this. In your reports that you are writing, it must be grounded in the truth. Our job is to paint a holistic picture of the young people that we have dedicated our professional work to. And if we are not telling the truth by sugarcoating, by ignoring very real challenges and problems, we're doing a disservice. We're not serving students. We must be truthful in what we see and report those. Here's where we're strength-based. Yes, we notice all of these things, but we don't stay there. We move towards, now here's what we can do. The reason why we write psychological evaluations is to improve outcomes for the young people that we work with. And somewhere along the way in the field of school psychology, the practice has got stuck in action. Deficit thinking is the most pervasive problem in education. And we think the goal is to write an evaluation. That is not the goal. The goal is to move this young person towards their path to success. And what's happening, there's a block. There's something that's impeding the success, whether academic, whether social, whether emotional, behavioral. There's something that is impeding that success. Our job is to create a holistic picture so that we can now move from where we are to where we could be. That's being strength-based. That's where we tap into the potential. That's where we tap into a holistic view of behavioral observations, of strength-based interviews, of creating strength impact statements at the end, of writing conclusions, and then recommendations that we can now move towards action. Look, this is the last thing that I'm going to say as we start to wrap up. For practitioners, it's not about ignoring challenges. It's not about hyper-focusing on deficits. It's not about going to the other end of that spectrum and solely focusing on strengths either. Either one of those done in isolation are going to create harm. I believe that we are here to do work that matters. And to do that, we must utilize tools that can help us to achieve that. Look, when paperwork takes less time and less energy, we can be more present. We can actually write strength-based. We can actually capture everything that's happening. It starts with doing work that matters. And Tim, to answer your question, it starts with us doing evaluations that's grounded in truth.
Yes. That's fantastic. Thank you, Byron. And I can tell you're deeply passionate about this subject. And of course, to bring this full circle, we can also use AI and ask Sophia how to make some of our sentences more strengths-based. But I know you're so passionate about this, so I wanted to get really quickly before we wrap up about your new book, because I know you will be talking a lot about these topics. And so if you want to just give a few words about your new book.
The new book is coming soon. Shift to what's strong. I've talked a lot. I've learned a lot since the release of Hacking Deficit Thinking. And deeply, I do believe people have good intentions, but good intentions never change the world. And so when people are busy and burnt out and stressed and overwhelmed, you default back to what you know. And in this new book, I want to put forth 6 strength-based habits that when life starts lifing, we can default back to these strength-based habits instead of defaulting to what's wrong. So coming soon.
Awesome. Kudos. The new album dropping soon. The new book. Oh, that's awesome, Byron. We're so proud of you and all the work you're doing and everything you've accomplished. It's truly incredible. We always like to end on something fun. So we're going to do a quick fun fact. We're going to go around. Byron, why don't you start and then we'll do a spin-off based on what you say.
So a fun fact about me, I have an identical twin brother, Byron McClure. This is factual stuff. You can look it up if you're on my social medias. I have an identical twin brother who I think is one of the most brilliant people in the world, too.
Oh, awesome. Did they have a tough time when you were in school deciphering you two?
My goodness, you might not be able to see it, but I have a birthmark right here. And I would mess with people all the time because they couldn't tell us apart. And then people would, boy, stop playing. Give me your wrist. Which one are you? And then they will be able to tell us apart. So yeah, we're identical.
So Andrea, do you happen to have an identical twin or something like that?
Well, I think it's funny. Byron, sometimes when he's presenting, will put up pictures and say, guess which one is me and which one's my brother. And I always get it wrong, though I, now met him for some time. So they really are identical. I have what some people sometimes call an Irish twin. I am 11 months younger than my sister, Angela. So for the month of August, we're the same age, we would say, growing up, because my birthday's August 1st. Hers is the 31st. So we're the same age for a month. So we're not real twins, but we like to pretend we are for a month a year.
That's cool. And I have a stepbrother who is within the same month as me. And so we grew up, of course, being best friends and are still very close to this day. So this was such a fun conversation. Byron, any last words of wisdom before we wrap up here?
Yeah, just my final thoughts. Do work that matters.
All right. Thank you, Byron. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. And thank you to the listener for watching Conversations with Boston School Psychologists, building safe and supportive schools, one conversation at a time. Please follow us on our socials, Boston School Psychs, and visit our website, bostonschoolpsychs.com, to learn more about our work. Join our next conversation to learn more about resources and tips for creating safe and supportive schools. Thank you.